Welcome back to In-Depth Literature. A little bit different type of content today. I wanted to do a collection update for everybody to show everybody my Thomas Wolfe collection. Some of y'all have been asking about that, so we are going to do that and update that content today in this video. We got a lot of Thomas Wolfe books to get through. Before we get to that, let me just do a little quick reading vlog, let you know where we're at with all of the stuff that we've been currently reading. We are currently on page 1261 of Les Miserables, so we are kind of getting towards the tail end of that, really taking my time to just digest it slowly and thoughtfully. And, you cannot speed read Les Miserables. Don't even try. It just will not happen. Continuing forth, we are almost done with House of the Dead by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I got about another page and a half left. And I honestly didn't want this book to end either. Very similar to the way I feel about Les Miserables. This is one of my favorite Dostoevsky works, even though it's more like a memoir. It's not the traditional Dostoevsky novel style that we might get, but just absolutely astounding. And it breaks my heart to hear that people DNF this book. They never finish it for whatever reason. So make sure you guys check out House of the Dead by Dostoevsky. Up next, we're still getting through the story of Jeannie Wiley. It's kind of interesting, but like I said, it's more focused on the scientific aspect of language versus, Jeannie's perspective. That would have been really hard to get because Jeannie Wiley could not write. I think maybe she eventually learned to read, but she could actually draw a little bit. But as far as writing and communicating and all that stuff, she really struggled with that. You guys can look up the story on Google. Also, on the memoir front, we're also reading another fantastic memoir, Among Grizzlies by Timothy Treadwell. This book is awesome. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I knew it would be entertaining because I'm a big fan of the Werner Herzog film Grizzly Man, but this is from the perspective of Timothy Treadwell himself. So that's our little quick reading update. So let's get into the Thomas Wolfe content right now. We've got a lot to get through, but the purpose of this Thomas Wolfe collection is not just to show off how many Thomas Wolfe books I got, but I want to talk about why I've chosen these ones, the different types of editions you might encounter, the quality of the print, the novels, the content, the stories themselves. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Thomas Wolfe. In fact, we probably will. So this is going to be all Thomas Wolfe, and we do have some more topical sort of literary Thomas Wolfe videos coming in the near future. So I hope you guys will look forward to that. So Thomas Wolfe has a really wide variety. He's got 4 really long, full-length major novels, and then he's got a couple novellas. He started out as a playwright. I currently don't have any of his plays or his letters. So I'm not saying this is the greatest Thomas Wolfe collection in the history of, YouTube or whatever, but it is a pretty extensive Thomas Wolfe collection. I've got a lot of different editions, a lot of different versions. We've got some biographies of Thomas Wolfe. So some of it is going to be work written about Thomas Wolfe, not necessarily just Thomas Wolfe himself, but it's all kind of part of the same. You guys can see that huge blank space in the bookshelf there. That is where all the Thomas Wolfe books usually go. So let's get into it. First and foremost, we have this really nice edition of Look Homeward Angel. I actually have not read this copy, but this is a really beautiful copy of Look Homeward Angel. The print is a little bit small. I would probably opt for one of the other editions of Look Homeward Angel that I have that I've actually read. But this is a good one to give to a friend, or maybe if you're going on a long trip and you don't want a huge bulky book. This is a nice choice. I really like the cover. It doesn't quite encapsulate the story of Look Homeward Angel. This looks more like a Michelangelo-esque type statue, but it's close enough. It's close enough in the vein of Thomas Wolfe, Look Homeward Angel. And this is the Scribner paperback fiction edition, and it does have, an introduction, as most, copies of Look Homeward Angel hopefully do. This introduction is not super long, not fairly extensive, but it's pretty good. Like I said, it is the complete version of, I think it's a complete version. It almost looks a little bit short, but this is the first copy of Look Homeward Angel that we have. I'll show it up here. It does say something on the margins there. What is that? With an introduction by Maxwell Perkins. Okay, so it does have the original Maxwell Perkins introduction. So that's cool. Like I said, not my favorite copy of Look Homeward Angel or my favorite edition, but it's pretty decent. Up next, we have Thomas Wolfe biography by Andrew Turnbull. This is the first Thomas Wolfe biography I believe that was ever written. I could be wrong, but this is an old book, probably from the 60s. I want to say it was published. And it's a pretty decent introduction to Thomas Wolfe. We're going to talk more about a better, more recent biography that's come about in recent years, back in the late 80s. But this is pretty good. It's got some really nice photographs in it as well. Like I said, the print is pretty decent, actually. The print is a little old-fashioned, but it's good. It does have photographs. I'll show you all what that looks like. I think it has photographs, yeah. So it does have some really nice photographs. Most of y'all have already seen. If you're a Thomas Wolfe fan, you've probably seen these photos a million times. I'm not going to go through all of them. But it does have a nice little retrospective. Some great pictures of W.O. Gant and the old Kentucky home, as well as Thomas Wolfe as a youth. That was Thomas Wolfe's teacher right there, I believe. Or is that his sister? Margaret Roberts. Yeah, that was one of his teachers that really had a big impact on him. So the Thomas Wolfe photographs are, that's why I like collecting the books, because you always get different pictures of Thomas Wolfe. This is when Thomas Wolfe played Buck Gavin in one of his own plays. His playwright professor said, well, we can't find somebody to play the leading male role, so it looks like that's going to be you. And he played this mountain man character. There's some other young pictures of Thomas Wolfe. Got a beautiful picture of Elaine Bernstein on the bottom there. I can't point to it properly right now. But so, yeah, I definitely recommend reading the Andrew Turnbull biography. Like I said, it's probably not the best Thomas Wolfe biography, but it's pretty darn decent. It's going to take me a while to rearrange all these, too. Up next, we have The Hills Beyond. These are all modern Louisiana State University pressings. These are absolutely beautiful. They don't come with pictures, but the print is absolutely fantastic. It's really dark. It's really rich. It goes against this really great quality white, paper, really bright white paper. Beautiful illustrations, obviously, on the front. And they do give you introductions on, well, actually, this one doesn't have an introduction, but it does tell you a lot about The Hills Beyond in the back. And these go nicely in the series with the next one, which is the beautiful copy, Louisiana State University pressing of The Web and the Rock. And this is probably the one that I would recommend getting. I think we have another copy of The Web and the Rock. It might be You Can't Go Home Again. I'm not sure. This is one of my favorite Thomas Wolfe novels, rather, and we'll probably do an analysis of this at some point. We've already covered Time in the River. We've covered Lost. We've done a little bit of Look Homeward Angel, but I think The Web and the Rock definitely deserves an analysis. It's probably the best of his posthumous work. It's a stronger work, in my opinion, than You Can't Go Home Again. But like I said, it's been a while since we read You Can't Go Home Again, so maybe we'll read that again soon. I've made tons of annotations in here because I just absolutely love this book. The quality's great. The spine is really strong. You don't have to worry about bending the spine because, there's a decent size margin there. We don't have to bend the spine. Up next, we actually covered this one a couple months ago. This is The Good Child's River. This is sort of a short, unfinished, posthumously published novella that Thomas Wolfe wrote about the younger life and existence of Elaine Bernstein and her family and the impact of the culture of New York City on the aspiring, Elaine Bernstein. She went on to work in costume design in the theaters and, rose up to a pretty prominent reputation, pretty prominent position. And I will say this is probably not Thomas Wolfe's strongest work or my favorite work, but it is definitely worth exploring. It is a beautiful story. Some of the rhetoric is definitely Thomas Wolfe's best, I would say. I really love how he was able to lose himself in different characters other than the Eugene Gant, sort of the Gant-Weber universe. It was really nice to see Thomas Wolfe do something a little bit different. There might be some other pressings of this, but probably not very many. This is kind of hard to find as it is. If you can't tell, it's really hot in here. So this is, pretty nice. I'll show you guys a little bit of the print quality. The book is a little bit elongated. Like, it's hard to describe, but the book, obviously you can see how long the book is, and there's not much room. The margin is decent, but I definitely had to resist the urge to really open the book and bend the spine. The book was kind of hard to kind of really make feel comfortable. And as you can see, it's slanted a little bit this way, so it's like warped a little bit. But if anybody has a little, maybe a better a copy that's in better condition than mine, just let me know. Let me know what it's like. This copy is pretty consistent. I like it. So this is a wonderful old school edition of You Can't Go Home Again. And this is probably not the first pressing, but this is probably a pressing from the 60s or the early 70s, I would imagine. This is kind of what books looked like back then, and this is a beautiful copy, but I don't think that I would ever annotate this one just because it is old and it's rare. You can just see the whole entire quality. And I'll take off the bookshelf or the book sleeve. And this is a Grosset and Dunlap Universal Library edition, I guess. It's still got the original price, 39 cents. Maybe that says $1 or 39 cents each. I don't know. But it's got this beautiful synopsis, I guess you would call it. Let's open this a little bit, see what it looks like. And you can tell this is pretty old. We'll check the date of the pressing, but this is an older Thomas Wolfe copy. It looks like the ones that you would find in like the local library or something. Let's see when this particular one was published. Obviously originally published in 1934. It looks like this one is from 1965. Yeah, so this one is fairly old. It's definitely got that vintage smell. It smells a little bit like mothballs. I might actually crack this open and read this one because it would be nice to read a different edition of You Can't Go Home Again. But I think for the sake of being able to annotate and so I don't get my allergies all messed up, I'll probably just keep this for just in my collection and not mark it up or even not read it. Because it's from 1965. That's, almost 70 years old. This is a pretty old book, and I want to keep it in as good of condition. And it actually came from a friend of mine that is deceased now, but he had a huge library, and his sister allowed me to, take some of his books after he passed away. So rest in peace to my friend. And apparently he was a Thomas Wolfe fan, so I'm really happy to have this in my collection. Up next, we got a really small, sort of short novella / memoir called Story of a Novel. This is written by Thomas Wolfe, obviously, as you can see there. And this is sort of his rhetoric regarding the writing process, the publishing process, the creative process. Kind of a lesser known work, but it's a beautiful edition. I definitely recommend that you guys check out Story of a Novel. He talks a lot about his relationship with Maxwell Perkins in here, and it's a little long-winded, but it's excellent. Maybe we'll cover it in the future. Up next, we have Thomas Wolfe Interviewed. This is a great book. I think we might have covered some topics from this little book. This is a great thing to have in your collection, along with the letters, which unfortunately we don't have yet. If I'm lacking eye contact, it's because I'm just kind of checking my frame here, because my software is all discombobulated now, and there's like two images of myself on the screen, so I'm trying to figure out which one is the one that I'm supposed to be referencing. But anyway, this is some great insight, like I said, into the creative process, into Thomas Wolfe's teaching, into his writing style. And he gave a lot of speeches at colleges, and some of these were transposed from those speeches. I think most of these were transposed, but it's got some great photographs of Thomas Wolfe, some lesser known photographs. Really some great stuff in here. Here's another image of Thomas Wolfe standing next to some guy. You can see how tall Thomas Wolfe was, and what a pleasure it must have been. That's like a sculpture over here somebody made. So that's why it's great to collect Thomas Wolfe books, because you just never know what you're going to get. I think there is another image in here somewhere. Maybe not, but this is just really excellent. If you want to learn more about Thomas Wolfe, I definitely recommend getting Thomas Wolfe Interviewed. Up next, we have another more updated, more revered Thomas Wolfe biography. This is the David Herbert Donald Look Homeward, A Life of Thomas Wolfe. And this is really probably the best biography of Thomas Wolfe that's been written. Who knows, maybe I'll write a new one, because I'm like the world's biggest Thomas Wolfe fan. But obviously that would take years and years of research and all that stuff. But hopefully somebody out there will write a new Thomas Wolfe book. But I'm not sure we need one, because this one is really excellent. And like I said, this one is also really excellent. Maybe we'll do a thumbnail here. And yeah, anyway, it's good to get different perspectives from different biographies. I wish it wasn't so glary. Just got to hold it at an angle. This has some phenomenal photographs. The print is really great. Like I said, this one's been annotated quite heavily, as you can see. Got a great image there of W.O. Gant and Eliza. What a great couple. And yeah, so I definitely recommend. This takes some time to get through. I mean, it's a hefty biography, but it covers everything. And it's absolutely excellent. It's got this great sort of musty, cozy smell. So coming up next, we have the Look Homeward Angel copy. This is the Scribner's, modern Scribner's, I guess, Simon & Schuster edition, I guess. But it's because it's got the little fire there. That's how you know it's Scribner. Not Scrivener, but Scribner, like Charles Scribner and Sons. So anyway, this is the first edition of, apart from the one that I read in the library in high school, this is the first copy of Thomas Wolfe that I ever got through. This was way before I started annotating and marking up my books. But we'll probably have another crack at Look Homeward Angel. Maybe with this copy, maybe with another one. I have several copies, then we'll talk about that. I've always loved this one because it's just such a great cover. You know, a lot of the Thomas Wolfe covers that I've seen are not so great, but this one's excellent. It really encapsulates the soul and the spirit of Thomas Wolfe's Wanderlost. Rather. The print is excellent, really great quality. I've had this book for many years, and it's always been good to me. It has not fallen apart. It's just aged really well. It's got a nice flop to it. Throne of Pages would be very happy with that book flop there. And up next we have, I'm not sure which category this one goes into. This is another Scribner, more like an updated Scribner version. I don't think it's part of this one because it just looks too different, but maybe it is. It actually could be. But this is the copy of You Can't Go Home Again that I read. A little bit bulky, a little bit big in comparison to this smaller one. I mean, what a difference in size there. You can definitely see that. But the good thing about this one is that the print is probably much larger. I think it is. You're not going to have to struggle with the print or anything like that. The cover is actually pretty awesome as far as Thomas Wolfe covers go. That looks like that could be Thomas Wolfe hanging out in Asheville or hanging out in New York City. And it looks good. It encapsulates the soul of Thomas Wolfe, unlike, some of the other ones. And this cover is actually really beautiful, but at the same time, you can't really tell who is supposed to be who. And it kind of fits, but it doesn't fit quite as much as this one. But anyway, this is a really great copy. It's got a little introduction by somebody, Gail Godwin, a Thomas Wolfe scholar. So we'll probably crack this open again. I remember when I worked at the art gallery, I read this, and I would carry it around with me everywhere I went. We got quite a bit more material to get through here. I know you guys are getting excited. So this is The Lost Boy. This is an updated new pressing by University of North Carolina Press. Actually came out with this not too long ago, maybe in the early 90s. A novel by Thomas Wolfe, The Lost Boy. A novella by Thomas Wolfe. This is about Thomas Wolfe's older brother that died. I might be mixing that up. He might have died when Thomas Wolfe was a young child. I can't remember. But either way, it's a beautiful story told through the perspectives of not only Grover, but his mother and his sister and Thomas Wolfe himself. And the final chapter is really touching, where he goes to the house, the hotel that they were staying at the time where his brother Grover died. And he sort of goes on this classic Thomas Wolfe memoir facing the ghost of time. And it's just absolutely astounding. Really great stuff. We might cover it in the near future. So up next, we have this more modern sort of biography retrospective. It's called When Do the Atrocities Begin? Thomas Wolfe biography. And this focuses on a specific time of Thomas Wolfe's career. And I think it was in 1937, after years of living alone in New York City, a manic depressive Thomas Wolfe returned to his family and his native Asheville. So this was after Thomas Wolfe's sort of alleged exile, right, where he finally made his way back to the South. And this documents that. It talks about the writing process, talks about Thomas Wolfe's growing dependence on alcohol, his manic depressiveness, his mood swings, his relationships. It is a little bit more scholarly than the type of thing I would usually read. It has a lot of endnotes, but it does have some wonderful new pictures of Thomas Wolfe that we haven't covered or that we haven't seen. So we'll probably reread this at some point and do like a retrospective of this, because this is a pretty astounding biography. You know, just some really great stuff in here overall. And like I said, it's a little bit opinionated. There's a lot of speculation that kind of comes up, but it talks about when Thomas Wolfe witnessed a shooting, near the train station or something like that. So just really interesting stuff. Up next, we have The Window of Memory by Richard Kennedy. This is the literary career of Thomas Wolfe. We have not read this one yet, but this is a beautiful copy I found on Amazon or perhaps a used book website. I can't remember. Got a great picture of Thomas Wolfe attending Harvard there. That's really great. Still got the old little library tag on it up at the top. Has some fascinating information about Thomas Wolfe. We did share this on a book haul not too long ago. I don't think it has any pictures, but this is definitely going to have to be read soon so we can kind of learn even more about Thomas Wolfe's writing. Now we're coming towards the tail end of this Thomas Wolfe collection. Up next, we have this beautiful copy of Look Homeward Angel, and this is actually very similar to... This is like the hardcover version of the one that I already showed you, because if you notice, if I zoom in here, those two sculptures are exactly the same. So I think this is kind of like the original hardcover version, and this is like the paperback version. So this is a really beautiful edition of Look Homeward Angel. I might actually read this one next. The print is really great. No damage to the book. I like how bright and light colored the whole design is. It's a little bit different than, obviously, this one. But let me know if you're a Thomas Wolfe reader out there. Let me know which one you have. Maybe you have a different one than I have. I know I've seen some of the translated versions from Russian readers and German readers and French readers and all kinds of people from the Netherlands. And there's all kinds of different covers of Look Homeward Angel. I would suggest, if you can read and understand English, try to read Thomas Wolfe in English. I mean, that's kind of a given. But if you have to use a translation, I'm not going to hold it against you. So up next, we have Oh Lost. This is a beautiful copy of Thomas Wolfe's original vision for Look Homeward Angel. Obviously, if you're a Thomas Wolfe scholar, you probably heard about Oh Lost. This is a beautiful, this is probably one of my favorite books on my bookshelf, not only because I love the story and I love Thomas Wolfe, but I just love this book. I mean, physically, it's heavy too. It's like you're carrying around a brick or something. It's a certified murder weapon, as Throne of Pages would say. It's got some good pictures of Thomas Wolfe and W.O. Gant in here. And I remember when I first picked up this copy, I was like, I'm not going to annotate this. I'm not going to mark it up. And then that obviously did not last long once I kind of really got into it and really started. So we'll probably, once we reread Oh Lost, we'll probably start marking it up from the beginning and re-annotating it. We have covered Oh Lost. Make sure you check out our video in the Thomas Wolfe playlist about Oh Lost versus Look Homeward Angel. Please join the Thomas Wolfe conversation below. Make sure you guys check out the playlist. Up next, we've covered this several times on this channel. This is one of my probably my favorite Thomas Wolfe novel, I would say, Of Time in the River. A complete masterpiece. This one has been heavily annotated and heavily studied. Great picture of Thomas Wolfe on the back here. There are some other versions of Time in the River that I would like to get my hands on. I think, in fact, Penguin Classics actually has a modern edition of this, which would be awesome to get a hold of. So this is, obviously, I mentioned to you all that my copy of Time in the River is, in fact, falling apart. You can see it right there. The spine of the book is completely detached. Right here, so we're gonna have to get out the old super glue, or I might just order a new copy too, and just kind of keep this on the shelf because this is not in very good condition. But the rest of it is fine. It just needs, that spine needs to be repaired. So this is the final installment of our Thomas Wolfe collection. This is the complete short stories of Thomas Wolfe, which we have read, compiled by Francis Skip and James Dickey. I assume they're the ones that compiled it, but it looks like they were also the editors and sort of the designers. Now, here's the thing with this book. I have two complaints. Now, the first one is kind of a surface level complaint, but the print, I'm not sure if you guys can tell, the print is a little bit blurry. And actually, once you start reading it, it doesn't really bother you or get that much in the way, but the print is a little dodgy. You can see it on camera a little bit. It just was not, it's not the best pressing that I've ever seen. And I'm not saying that that's terrible. Maybe this is more like an independent publisher. Maybe they didn't, they can't make it look as good as a Penguin Classic. I get it. And once you actually start to read it, it doesn't bother you that much, but it's a little bit of a distraction. And the second complaint I have with this book is that a lot of these were actually covered in The Hills Beyond in that short story collection. Some of these are little experts taken from A Time in the River, or You Can't Go Home Again, or The Web and the Rock. And I felt a little bit because some of these stories kept coming up, and I feel like I said, I think I've read these before. And so a lot of them are little chunks that were taken from Thomas Wolfe's novel. Now, there are some short stories in here that you can't get anywhere else. I think like Boomtown and The Four Lost Men and No Door, Death of the Proud Brother, The Train in the City. So some of it is exclusive, but after a while, I started to notice that a lot of these were just excerpts from Thomas Wolfe's larger work. But it does, interestingly enough, the purpose of that, I think, was to show that Thomas Wolfe functions really strongly on the short story format, just as much as he does. I think Thomas Wolfe functions far better as a grand novelist. But if you take, a lot of his chapters can exist as kind of short stories into themselves. Now, this red here does not really bother me on the cover, but it is extremely jarring to try to read this. That was not a very good graphic design decision. To have that, that's hurting my eyes. I can barely read it. I'm not sure why it works on the front. Maybe because it's big and bold, but that color does not work against the purple on the back. We're actually recording this clip after the fact because I forgot to include this because this was in my tiny paperbacks collection. This is a beautiful mass market paperback version of The Web and the Rock. Rather old, probably from the 70s or the 60s, but I really like this. This really encapsulates the story of The Web and the Rock. That profile almost looks like it could be Thomas Wolfe himself. So this is one of my most prized possessions as well. I have not read this copy. I might split this copy open and read it. The print is pretty good. It doesn't have any photographs. Does it have an introduction? It has an author's note. It has Thomas Wolfe's original author's note in there. And let's just check the pressing year on this. This is from 1965, and it was repressed in 67. So this is another vintage Thomas Wolfe book. So this is something that you can appreciate as a Thomas Wolfe collector, is this 60s era version of The Web and the Rock. But maybe there's another edition out there. Please let me know what's available. And that is the end of our Thomas Wolfe collection. Let me know which editions you have. Let me know what editions you like. Let me know how much Thomas Wolfe you've read. Let me know what biographies of Thomas Wolfe you've read, what retrospectives. I know my friend on Instagram is a huge fan of translating Thomas Wolfe's letters. So that's probably the one gap we have in our collection is I don't have any of the Thomas Wolfe letters or the Elaine Bernstein letters. So I would like to try to get those in my collection. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. Check out the playlist. Follow me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official. We will see everybody in the next one.